Does freedom of speech include hate speech? Should hate speech be curtailed? That is probably one of the grandest questions in philosophy, in sociology, in jurisprudence, in day-to-day policy making. On surface, that seems like for a person who is a know-it-all, that seems like a no-brainer question, because the phrase of hate speech denotes that it must be something heinous, nefarious, and therefore it should not be allowed. And meanwhile, everything else should be allowed. Everyone should be allowed to say anything. You should comment on certain restaurants, certain food. You should comment on certain football players. However, this is on theory, right? Any adult who thinks this is a no-brainer question, basically he or she is just a 10-year-old brain living in an adult body, because anyone who has experienced life in society knows how difficult this question actually is in practice, how difficult it is to arbitrate what actually is hate speech, how difficult to arbitrate what kind of statements should be allowed. Millions of judges have decided on these sort of matters respectively, and until today the matter is still not settled. There is no clear rules on what to do, and in fact the yardstick of deciding what is hate speech differs so much between countries. Some countries, for example United States, of course you all know, it gives a lot of freedom of speech. That there was this landmark case called Sullivan versus New York Times. In that case, the court ruled that the news reporters should be allowed to report the negative news of a politician, regardless of its truthfulness, regardless how scandalous, how vexatious the report seems to be. So there is one extreme, almost absolute freedom of speech. On the other hand, some countries, you can look at some country, for example, my country. Half a year ago, I believe Malaysia Kini was fined for some comments it did not even make. It was not responsible in making. That was quite outlandish, actually. Hence, it is very hard to arbitrate freedom of speech and censorship. All right. Let's talk about the origins of freedom of speech and censorship. First of all, freedom of speech is a fairly modern idea. I believe it only existed after the Enlightenment, because societies before the Enlightenment, it was they were largely feudal societies. For example, in the Eastern civilization, let's say in China, most societies were governed by emperors, by imperials, and hence I don't believe people back then were allowed or were willing to criticize people, especially the king. Let alone, I don't even think the citizens in 15th century in China were able to conjure, would have any kind of independent thinking to even conjure thoughts, negative thoughts regarding their kings. That sounds a bit poignant, but that's a reality. And meanwhile, in Western societies, before the Enlightenment, the societies were mainly governed by the church, the Orthodox Church, and if you didn't follow the teachings of church, you would be regarded as unorthodox. You will be regarded as heresy, and you will be punished, like how Galileo was being punished via house imprisonment. And after the Enlightenment, we have freedom of speech. It is quite ubiquitous today. Lots of countries allow them, although to a different degree. Why does it suddenly become ubiquitous? The reason is, first of all, is we celebrate individuality. We treat every single human as a real human being, a real individual, and therefore you should have the right to utter whatever your thought, however erroneous or however stupid they are. But second reason is more important because we want society as a whole to progress. We want good ideas to emerge. To do that, we need to have a lot of ideas. When you allow 7 billion people to utter 7 billion ideas, there will be a lot of bad ideas, definitely. However, through competition, through free market, through evolution, that those few good ideas would emerge and would totally change humankind. So that's the fundamental idea. But of course, the main problem of allowing 7 billion people to have 7 billion speeches is that you risk having a lot of horrendous ideas. And that's why there is a censorship, or at least a lot of governments are still having this concept. Or another name of this is the so-called infamous Sedition Act. You, as a government, as an authority, you regard certain speeches, certain ideas as seditious, as offensive, and therefore you want to censor them. You want to suppress them. Censorship. I believe censorship dated way much earlier. Is a concept that is rather old. I think it dates back to antiquity because the nature of the universe, the world, is violence. You have different life, different organisms competing for resource. Resource is limited. We have unlimited desire to progress, to grow. Hence, million years ago, even among animals, people would use violence to solve problems. You don't like another person, you think he's stupid, whatever he or she proposes is stupid, you censor them, you use violence to dethrone them. Likewise, I believe early monarchy, early imperial society, feudal society would use all kinds of censorship. Whoever that criticizes the authority would be punished immediately, so that society could quickly return back to the peaceful form. So that is the origin of censorship, and today censorship comes in all form. The most rudimentary one is it's not about owning government. Anyone who has done remotely any form of moderation work understands this. Be it you are a teacher, let's say you have to stand in front of a group of 30 students. You have to moderate their ideas, their speech. And be it you are a manager, you have to manage a group of subordinates. Be it even as simple as a WhatsApp group moderators, a forum moderator. Anyone who has done all this job understand the nature of censorship, because there are certain times a certain individual would utter something seems outrageous, seems something that alarm people. Then you have to make a decision: should I allow that or not? Should I censor that or not? And it is a very difficult job because, first of all, again, it's very subjective. No one should be able to decide what is hate speech for everyone else. Secondly, you have to be a really good prophet. You have to prophesize. No, you have to predict the repercussions of certain statements. If you allow them, would there be any repercussions, or would it be harmless? So today, censorship comes in all forms, be it in online forums, be it in schools. Teachers have to censor certain students to ask them to shut up. Be it in companies, you have to allow whether a certain employees to express their thoughts, their ideas, their opinions about a company. And of course, the governments have to decide whether to point a gun at a certain people, a certain group of people. And this is very difficult. So now we have a continuum. On one hand, you have a rather open society with a lot of freedom of speech. On the other, you have a extremely censored society. Most of things are not allowed. Basically, a censored society, it existed. There is an example in a fictional world in the novel 1984. There is this thing called Newspeak. In that world, basically the government even regulated what words could you use. Dictionaries and thesaurus become obsolete in that world. People could only use very few words, and if possible, the tyrannical government even hopes people don't have to speak at all, because when you don't speak, you don't cause trouble. You are just like a robot, just function in a normal daily life. On the other hand, the extremely free society, it seems like a utopian idea. It doesn't really exist, not even United States of America, because even in United States, certain speeches would still encounter problems. But however, United States is actually quite near to an ideal free society with a lot of freedom of speech, with few extreme exceptions, such as child pornography, maybe terrorism, things like that. So these are two extremes. But extremes are very easy to decide, right? The most tricky case is cases in the middle. So I give you an example. If a person utters a really rude statements and criticism against government, against king, against authority, or even as simple as a student in a classroom criticizes the teacher very rudely, and the criticism has some merits, but however it is very rude, should that be considered hate speech or not? On the other hand, the other extreme is you have something that looks like a hate speech but is fictional. Let's say you talk about organizing terrorism group, but it's just a joke, or it's just a novel talking about how could a group of people become terrorists and kill people all around. But it's all purely fictional. It's movie, it's novel. Or even more extreme, people discussing whether you should make cartoon porn, the so-called hentai, and inside the cartoon porn, should you allow to draw kids, child pornography, but it's not real, it's only cartoon. Those things look like hate speech, looks like things that should be censored, but they are all purely fictional. It's just a joke. Those people who create those things would say it's just a joke. So should those things be allowed or not? Should those things be protected under freedom of speech? So in the middle, we have these two conflicting situations. Hate speech that are actually jokes, should they be protected? Real criticisms that are very rude and looks like hate speech, it looks like containing something very provoking, but real criticism, should they be banned or censored or not? So we have these two paradoxical situations that is very hard to arbitrate, and this is the place where most people always have arguments. Very hard to decide. Like why do people feel upset when their Facebook accounts are being banned? Because they merely state a real criticism that is slightly sensitive. It offended some people. Why should they be banned? People get upset, and then the authority would come out and say, although it looks like real criticism, but it's too rude, you should not be allowed. Things like that. So this is a difficult topic. I wouldn't be able to enunciate so well today. I will try again in another episode. See you.